Welcome to the first round of the Rapid Tournament in one small village, which is called Lovchenat, in northern Serbia. In the first round, we are facing the guy who is rated around 2000, and I open a game with e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop c4, Italian game, and he picked this a little bit more passive line with bishop e7, where I directly strike the center d4 and he defended with d6. In this position, white should choose to close directly with d5 and later on play on the king side by going something like h3, bishop e3, knight c3, queen d2 and followed by g4 attack. Instead I went h3, didn't play d5 directly, he went knight f6, I went knight c3 and he castled. Engine is always recommending to go for d5 because at some point black could have some counterplay by taking on d4. Not strictly here, but in some other moment. I went for bishop e3, and the reason why evaluation bar drops a little bit is because I missed one opportunity for black, and that's knight takes e4, and after knight takes e4, d5. That's actually a huge counterplay for black. That's why in all these positions I should opt for d5 anytime you got a chance, and then you can go bishop e3 later. Instead bishop e3, he went for a6, and now here, that's the counterplay I'm telling you. He also want to go b5, and if he spot knight takes e4, this motive is very common in these positions. The reason I go d5, spot that move, he went knight b8, and now we just have more space in this middle game. I went a4 to stop b5 queenside counterplay. He's doubting now what to choose to play. He commit very big positional mistake, a5. Why is this positional mistake? It's because creates the weakness on b5 that later can be used for black at all. He should keep the pawn on a6 and plan to push something like b5 in the future. Playing c6 doesn't make any big difference because we can always take that one and open the d line and fire on this pawn, or we can always keep the tension by not reacting on that move. Now I found one interesting plan, retreating my bishop on e2, because anyway bishop on c4 is kind of restricted. So I wanted to create the support on this diagonal, and after knight bd7, reroute my knight on d2 and then later on c4. He went rook e8, trying to create a gap for some of his pieces, and now I successfully maneuvered the knight on the queen side. Why is this knight good here? It's because he still creates the tension in the center, also targets the a5 pawn, and later maybe can come on e3 and then f5. He went b6, another big inaccuracy and generally creating the weaknesses in the structure. After that move, definitely all these light squares are becoming more soft, so the moves such as knight b5 can create crucial target on his backward pawn on c7. Only benefit of this pawn move is to create a gap for the bishop to put some pressure on this diagonal. But as long as we have this bishop here, we are very fine with keeping this knight on c4, even though trading this bishop for this knight would be a lovely trade for us, because this light squares becomes even more in our control. The reason why I'm thinking here so much, and then after some time commit to castles, was should I go for normal plan of breaking with f4 on the f line, or should I keep my king in the center, or maybe longside castles to proceed with g4 h4 attack? I decided to go castles directly. He went for knight c5, and now here I should take this knight, but I didn't like that engine combination. I instead went for bishop to f3, which is the move that engine doesn't like, because looks a little bit passive and also leaves this diagonal. So now very powerful move for black is bishop a6. On the other hand, if I go something like f3, there is nice move knight h5, which I saw, and then later bishop g5, strictly controlling these dark squares where I can get in a big problem. Bishop f3 I found very interesting because later I can go maybe g3, bishop g2 and then push f4. He went bishop f8. And engine still recommends to take this knight on c5. But as a human reaction, as a human move, I can't make this one because then all these dark squares on the board just disappears for me. And if he managed to activate his bishop in the future, I can really suffer on these squares. So that's why I kept my bishop, didn't want to trade, and maybe in future I will do that. I played queen d2, connect my rooks. Now my plan is to go something like g3, king g2. Of course, I can't do that as long as this bishop is here. Maybe I can start with king h2 first. Also, b3 prophylaxis, bringing the rook to the middle, something like that is nice plan. But I also need to worry about the e4 pawn. He went for h6. The point of that one is not to stop any bishop g5. It's to create a gap for the knight on h7. I went b3 to control the knight on c4. He played bishop to a6. But now since we have b3, we don't care about even this trade because we're going to replace it with a pawn. Rook f1, leaving this diagonal pressure. He went knight h7. He wants to go knight g5. Also maybe bishop e7 and bishop g5. That's now is just right moment to go for g3. And then if he goes knight g5, we have perfect spot for our bishop on g2, where we still protects the pawn on h3. And if he tries now bishop e7, bishop g5, we are just in time to commit h4 and restrict the beauty of their g5 square. He went bishop c8, perfect moment bishop g2, protects the pawn. Then we are going to play king h2 and slowly develop our plan towards f4 break. He played bishop d7. He want to reconnect the rooks and maybe go for something like queen c8 and increase the pressure on h3. King h2, nice prophylactical move. We are following our plan. He played directly knight g5. And now there is a nice trick here. If we play something like rook ad1, there might be something like bishop takes h3 here. Of course, in this moment not, because bishop takes g5 is there, but if we take this bishop, there is knight f3, and we lose the game. So, knight g5, I have to be aware of these tactics. Of course, I can always take while the queen is here, but after queen c8, I really need to take care of this diagonal. Speaking about that variation, I played queen e2. So just to not think anymore about these problems. On f3 square, my next move is h4, kicking this knight out of the way, or I can play f4, which could be even much better. Now, again, engine recommends this take, let's say pawn takes, and f4 break, but I still, as a human player, don't want to open up the position without my dark square bishop. So I'll do everything in my hands to keep bishop pair and especially this bishop on e3. I don't mind trading this bishop on g2 for some endgame, let's say. But it's very important in these structures to keep your bishops because if you want to open up, they are the ones that controls the middle. I noticed that this player is not committing any big critical moves, such as f5. f5 is one of the best moves here. He's also preparing, but Black doesn't have space and doesn't have too much time to play waiting moves here because he should look for some trades and openers. And if he allows me smooth f4 later, that will be a big problem. I went bishop d2, slowly creating the support for this pawn and preparing f4 break. So now very crucial for Black is to strike with f5 and stops me playing the move f4 because when I take, he takes back with bishop. I do have a problem now here, and then later I could have the problem with all these moves. Pawns. After bishop d2, he won rook a d8. I played rook a d1. Still f5 is very necessary break, and I'm slowly building for my move f4. Now maybe it's the last call for Black to commit this move. but instead he went for bishop c8. That's not working now. Again, he's preparing for something, but he's actually waiting for my move f4. But once I played f4, white will be much better because suddenly all my pieces are in the center and supporting this break. As I mentioned, f4 directly, target and I target opponent. Of course, taking here is something black must play, and after take to go knight h7 and then reroute a knight to put a pressure here. This is his last call to do something, to open up and try to fight this to survive. Any sort of other passive move, not taking this pawn, will lead in closure of the king side, where white will have dominance because he won't even get more space. And he went for the knight h7. That's also a very critical mistake. I understand that move. He want to reroute the knight now here, but he missed that I can play f5, close this bishop, and close this line. So now maybe ask yourself, why we close when our position is already closed? Do we need to open something? Yes, but now we have clear plan of putting the rook on g1, going h4, g4, g5, and strike the king for checkmate. He win bishop e6 to pin this knight, but we don't worry about anything. Our knight is protected by pawn and also with queen. Now we have all time on this world to reroute our rooks on the g line, f line, and start pushing there. That's why I went rook g1. He played king to h8, trying to adapt his pieces for these breaks, but that can't do much. Bishop f1 is a nice move to support the pin here. So when I move my queen, why not to have bishop supporting the queen side also and keep the angle open for the rook. Queen d7. The purpose of this move is the next following idea of black, which will be fatal for his position. On the other side, if he plans to go g6, we can always support it with g4. I went queen f2 to leave the pin. He played bishop e7, trying to get something on g5, and now perfect move h4. At that point, he will try to use these weaknesses on the king side, because there is some soft spots and maybe some targets that could be annoying. That's why he went knight f6, targeting the g4, also h5. Going now to move bishop to h3 will blunder the pawn on e4, so I might be careful about that one. Also, if he plays h5, he will fix the structure and then implement this knight in this outpost. Queen f3, multifunctional move, protecting the pawn, protecting g4. And now my opponent played fatal mistake, b5. I immediately realize that after take with my pawn, he takes back with bishop. He's simply losing the bishop pair, which is one benefit, and second benefit is the reason why we put his bishop here is also to support queenside. So now we directly have this discovery attack and tactic on queen and rook, where white got immediately winning position. Queen b8, doesn't matter now, we can take on f7, we can take the rook. I decided to take on f7, we check, king g8, takes the rook, they take back with queen. Now it's just about easy converting. Also, we need to keep on mind that these knights could be dangerous if both of them jump on the king side, but we have so many pawns, so restricting is not hard task here. Rook to e1, protecting the pawn here. So after h5, he wanna jump with this knight on g4. I have this move bishop h3, which looks a little bit passive because it stays behind the pawn. But anyway, later we can also break with something like g4. That's a great deal. Trading pieces when you exchange up, that's totally enough to win the game. He played queen to d6, trying to reroute a queen maybe on b6 and then to do something to queenside pawns. Pawn is a pawn, so I just took on a5. He tried to activate the rook on a8 and then later bring the rook to a2. I need to play with my bishop now. I brought a bishop back to c3 to increase pressure on e5. Rook a2 targets the pawn. Rook g2 defends the pawn on c2. Last chance for black is to try creating some central break. He did that with c6, which is totally understandable. He can't wait for me to consolidate my pieces even more. And now I brought my rook to d2, supporting the pawn in middle. We got some trade. C takes, E takes. And now we allow them opening some diagonals potentially here. But that's not a big deal because our king is more than safe. His pieces are not simply coordinated to attack our king properly. Queen f4 offering the queen trade. So whenever you are better or having material advantage or space advantage in winning position, just go for trades and simplify as much as you can to reduce the counterplay from your opponent. Black should have kept the queens on the board, but he decided to take my queen. I take back with pawn and played bishop d6, targeting f4, and now very easy move bishop e5, centralizing the bishop, defending the pawn, and attacking his piece, offering another exchange. He is declining that trade. Grabbing space with d6, bishop d8. And now it's just time how you're gonna push these pawns. You need to protect your rook. I started with b4, moving the knight from c5. He went back to d7. And my next move is c4, but before that I need to protect my rook on d2. That's why I went rook e2. He went bishop e6. And I just pushed c4. Offering trade of rooks, plus c5 is coming. With these bishops, rooks, pawns are just pushing. And he resigned the game. The tournament can't start better. We are 1 out of 1. With white pieces, one very nice game. Next round we are playing black. We are still favorite. And I'll see you in the next round.